Say, if I were to look at what do Western ambassadors do in India, if my ambassadors did a fraction of that, you would all be up in arms. So I think there are double standards here. I appear to be an optimist in what is a relatively pessimistic panel, if not room.
A celebrity billionaire has become the voice of ordinary Americans. China proclaims to be the biggest democracy in the world. Russia has become the new role model for how to invade your neighbor. The German government has collapsed. The French government is in a permanent state of near collapse, which means that Italy is now officially the most stable democracy in Europe. What makes a democracy a democracy?
I mean, just by the sheer scope of instances and countries you just went through, I think it demonstrates that we have a crisis of democracy.
900 million, about 700 million voted. We count the votes in a single day.
You know, you can't pay your rent with democracy.
You don't eat democracy for breakfast.
Senator, you said that, democracy doesn't put food on your table. Actually, in my part of the world, it does.
Who doesn't like it when an egotistical Western panel gets snowed by some outsider who nobody has mainly heard of? If you haven't heard his name yet, you probably will be soon. His name is Jay Shanker, and he's going viral all over the internet because of what he just threw down in Munich, Germany, when he was just obliviating the West. The Minister of External Affairs in India just threw down. He made them all look stupid, and it just went viral just overnight. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen it, well, everybody else pretty much has. Because it's that good. So what you're going to want to do here is grab a drink and enjoy the speech that happened in Munich. One of the greatest speeches of 2025, ladies and gentlemen. Jay Shankara, the External Affairs of India. Here we go.
I want to go to Jay now. There's one of my favorite stories about Mahatma Gandhi was when he traveled to Britain and somebody asked him, "What do you think about Western civilization?" And he said, "I think it would be a good idea."
We're still waiting.
Yeah. So let me paraphrase that slightly. As we're having this discussion, this tortured discussion, what do you think about Western democracy?
Well, look, before I do that, because I think I appear to be an optimist in what is a relatively pessimistic panel, if not room. So I'll begin by sticking up my finger, and don't take it badly, it's the index finger. The mark you see on my nail is a mark of a person who's just voted. We just had an election in my state, just over. Last year, we had a national election. In Indian elections, roughly 2/3 of eligible voters vote. At the national election, electorate of about 900 million, about 700 million voted. We count the votes in a single day. Nobody disputes the result after it's announced. And if you look, and by the way, from the time we started voting in the modern era, 20% people more vote today than they did decades ago. So the first message that somehow democracy is in trouble globally, worldwide, I'm sorry, I have to differ with it. I mean, right now, we are living well, we are voting well, we are optimistic about the direction of our democracy, and for us, democracy is actually delivered. Senator, you said that, democracy doesn't put food on your table. Actually, in my part of the world, it does. Because it actually, today, because we are a democratic society, we give nutrition support, food support to 800 million people. And for whom that is a matter, of how healthy they are and how full their stomachs are. So the point I want to make is, look, different parts of the world are going through different conversations. Please do not assume that this is some kind of universal phenomenon. It is not. There are parts where it is working well. Maybe there are parts where it's not. And the parts which are not, I think people need to have an honest conversation about why it's not. I would argue that as to an extent as someone dispassionately viewing it, which was your question, there are some problems. A lot of it is is accumulated problem of the model of globalization that we've followed for the last 25, 30 years. I think a lot of chickens have come home to roost.
Okay, I hate to interrupt this great speech, but I just got to chime in real quick on what he is saying here, ladies and gentlemen. Democracy works. It's working for India. It's working for them. He's saying they have almost 1 billion people. They count the votes in a day. We need to find out what system they're using, first of all, for that. Now, next he's saying, yeah, democracy works in many countries, but some countries where it's not working, we need to take a look at the people and the governance in those countries, not the democracy, not the plan for it, not the voting in the people. You know, it's working, but the governance and the globalization of it, when you start going deep state and the government in the democracy turns into a globalization instead of your country first and your people first, then you're going to have problems, because now you're getting corruption and you're getting other views other than what was voted on to happening. Therefore, things start crumbling down. I think that's what he's saying here, but I'm not 100% sure. Let me know if you caught anything other than that in what he's already said. But I'm going to let this ride through the rest of the way, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, please like and subscribe for more of this kind of content.
I think a lot of chickens have come home to roost. Yes, there are issues, but from our perspective today, for us, democracy is delivered. We have a visibly less elitist society. We have one where the public has faith in the political process, where actually every election, in a way, has been a kind of a verdict on the quality of governance. That, I told you we just voted in one. My party won that election. We were in the opposition earlier. We had a national election. My party won that election too, and we were incumbents. And we feel, if Prime Minister Modi got elected for the third time, the ruling party got elected, and to a large extent it is because of the delivery through democratic systems. So it is healthy, it is well, maybe not all over the world, but let's not make that universal.
We used to assume in the West that our system is the one that everybody wants to adopt over time. So I guess the question to you, India, of course, being the largest democracy in the world, is your sense among your counterparts in, again, for lack of a better term, the global South, that democracy is still a system people aspire to, countries aspire to, or are there now powerful alternatives, such as the Chinese model, which may be more attractive to people?
Well, look, to an extent, all big countries are unique to an extent, but we would certainly hope, to the extent we think of democracy as a universal aspiration, ideally a reality, but at least an aspiration. It is in large part because India chose a democratic model after independence. And it chose a democratic model because we had fundamentally a consultative, pluralistic society. Now, there was a time, and I have to say this in all honesty, where West treated democracy as a Western characteristic and was busy encouraging non-democratic forces in the global South. It still does. In many cases, I can point to some very recent ones, where actually everything that you say you value at home, you don't practice abroad. So I do think the rest of the global South will view, the successes and the shortcomings and the responses of other countries. They will also ask themselves which ones of them they relate to. I would argue that in many ways, India, because it's historically been an open society, one very much linked with the world, many countries of the global South are more likely to say the Indian experience is more transposable to their societies than perhaps those of others. So I do think in our progress as a democracy. The fact that, for all the challenges that we've had, even at a low income, we have stayed true to the democratic model, which is almost, if you look at our part of the world, we're pretty much the only country that has done that. So I think it's something the West should look at, because if you do want democracy eventually to prevail, it's important the West also embraces successful models outside the West. One look, I would challenge the equation of, liberalism in a kind of an international way with democracy. I do think different societies have their own cultures, their own values, their own ways of doing things. And the idea that there is some kind of universe, one truth and one judgment and one norm, and that should be preached, propagated, evaluated, and judged. I think that is one of the big issues we're having today in politics. And it is done by think tanks, it's done by people who do ratings, it is done by newspapers. So I think there is a reaction in many parts of the world to self-appointed custodians, people who've never fought an election, who are nothing to do with democracy, actually telling the rest of the world what is right and what is wrong in democracy. And I think it is, to me, inevitable that it will be challenged. My second issue, is, look, every country has its mainstream politics. It has its outliers. Okay. If I were to look, for example, at how much Europeans, Westerners reach out to outliers in those societies. If I were to look at what do Western ambassadors do in India, if my ambassadors did a fraction of that, you would all be up in arms. So I think there are double standards here.
So what was he saying there? Democracy without hypocrisy? Saying you're not practicing what you're preaching. You're preaching a good word on democracy, but you're not practicing that. You're showing the world something totally different than what you're trying to distribute, or you're trying to distribute for us to eat something, but you don't want to eat it yourself. The way he just throws the Western world's and the uniglobal system of democracy out the window, saying that the deep state and those people that are involved in making rules that were not elected, they should not even be involved in this at all because they don't have no skin in the game. When it's the people whose cultures are totally different over here think democracy is one way. The people who think, they're over there, they think another way. But they're gonna, whatever works for their culture, the democracy that works for them isn't the democracy that might work for you. Europe's, Germany's democracy might not work for Ghana or Kenya, and Kenya's might not work for Burkina Faso, or Burkina Faso's might not work for China. But China does have a democracy, but I take that back. But Burkina Faso might not work for the United States. But it's also, cultures are so different that they have to shape their democracies in a different way, is what he's saying. That's what I gathered from it, but what did you gather from it? Because I need your comments down below. We need your input down below, because you guys out there teach us more than we could ever teach you. But these speeches actually bring us into a new level of thought, and a new level of actually what we can do better than we have in the future. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, love you all. One love. God is good, and we will see you on the next one. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.